everybody. I think we have a couple of people still joining, so I'm just going to wait a couple of minutes. So glad that you guys could join me this evening. I'm just going to wait another minute or so, and then we're going to get started. So I'm going to have a couple of minutes at the very end if anybody would like to ask questions, or if you have any input, feedback, love to hear it. These videos and webinars are also available on our website, so it will be recorded and posted if you would like to have any additional information or would like to watch the webinar again. So again, thank you for joining me this evening for the webinar titled How to Prevent Neighbor-to-Neighbor Disputes in Your Association. It can be kind of a heated topic because everybody has different ideas of how they would want to deal with disputes. And, you know, man, don't we all wish that we could choose our neighbors, right? So again, my name is Erin Huegerich, and I work at Ardent Residential. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. So yeah, so guess what? Tonight we're going to be talking about all things related to neighbor-to-neighbor disputes in your association. Like I said, as we all know, when we're buying our homes, we can't choose our neighbors, which, man, I mean, that would be so amazing if we, made this huge financial investment. We're spending all of this money investing in our home, and gosh, wouldn't it be amazing if we could choose our neighbors and choose everything about our community and choose our boards and, everything just run perfectly. Well, unfortunately, it doesn't always work like that. So, that can also be unsettling and unnerving with it being such a huge financial investment. So really, for the case for most people, it's how do we resolve? How do we deal with neighbor to neighbor conflict? Because they live next to you. They're going to be there. You're going to see them all the time unless they're moving, which is not going to happen, on a regular basis. Most people who move into their home are going to be there for at least a year or more. So that's going to be that statistic. So who should or shouldn't be involved in a little dispute? Or is it going to escalate to be a bigger dispute? Who do you contact? What do you do? What are the steps? And what if it escalates? So don't worry, we're going to dive right in and we're going to talk about all of that right now. So really, initially, it's going to be really important to be proactive. That's a key component, is to be proactive and to really think about the escalation and kind of resolve it before it occurs and it escalates. The regulations from the Department of Housing and Urban Development and the Fair Housing Act make community associations liable for taking prompt actions to correct neighbor-to-neighbor harassment that meets certain guidelines. So there are going to be certain situations such as harassment, things like that, where associations will be involved because they don't want to be liable. So if a resident is experiencing harassment, the association needs to take prompt action, or your association can be at risk for a lawsuit. Everyone at the end of the day deserves quiet enjoyment of their homes. In other words, homeowners have the right to peacefully live in their community without being annoyed, harassed, or interfered with. In the community covenants, there's usually a clause that will talk about quiet enjoyment. So I encourage owners to review their community documents and fully understand the rules and regulations to have a better understanding about what's going on within your community, what's allowed, what's not. And a lot of times that can help diffuse certain disputes that would be ongoing as well, just by being aware of your community documents. So understanding neighbor to neighbor dynamics and, really what is a dispute and what are the impacts on the associations. So neighbor to neighbor disputes can be defined as conflicts between residents within the community. So these disputes can arise out of all sorts of things. They can happen because somebody's having a bad day and they, are just going to end up picking a fight because they have something else that's going on in their personal life. It could be because of personal conflict. It could be because of a different agreement, a disagreement. It could be because a conflict over certain, covenant violations or rules and regulation disagreements and the way that people interpret different things. So the list can go on and on and on. But, believe it or not, disputes and conflict between owners can have a huge effect on property values, on the entire community and the overall atmosphere. So for example, if a neighbor decides not to cut their grass out of spite because they're in a tiff with their neighbor, I mean, that's not helping the community, right? You don't want to be driving past a house and you're not even involved. You have no idea what's going on, but then you see your neighbor, up the road and their grass is really tall. But the only reason they're doing that is because they're in a dispute with the neighbor that's right next to them. So, that's just, it's not good. Or what if you see a police car, coming into your community all the time because they're being called because two neighbors are having a certain conflict or dispute. Nobody wants to see the cops coming in all the time and being called because there's a dispute. So then you have, homeowners start feeling unsafe, or maybe, they decide to move, or they decide to rent their property more often, or, they don't feel safe even going on a walk with their husband, wife, significant other, or, letting their kids play outside or taking their dog on a walk. So all of those things, you want those things for your community. You want to be in a community where you feel safe, where you feel safe because your neighbors are aware, where you feel safe because, if there's something going on, that your neighbors are going to be there for you and they're looking over you, in a positive way. So, neighbors are there. We want to have a friendly atmosphere. And so there's different ways to promote those things. And we'll get into that in just a little bit. It can be challenging, especially for a board and an association, to distinguish, when do you get involved? When is the association, going to be needed during a dispute? And when is it going to be, more just like a petty argument and you need to just stay out of it and let the owners figure it out amongst themselves. So if a dispute is just that, the association should try to stay out of it as much as possible. If a neighbor is complaining about, maybe somebody playing their music too loud, or, leaves from another yard or blowing into my yard, or somebody was on a walk, we don't know who it is, but, somebody left some pet waste. Of course, those things are annoying. Of course, nobody wants pet waste left in their yard. Of course, nobody wants to hear loud music if you've had a rough day at work, or if you just put your baby down for a nap or something like that. Of course, those things, you don't want those things, but you also realize that more than likely when you move into a community, sometimes those things are going to occur. And those are things that, can be frustrating over time, right? I mean, that's nobody wants that to have that recurring issue. I wouldn't want it, but at the end of the day, you also have to realize that you moved into a community, you are going to have neighbors, and they come with pros and cons. So it's picking and choosing your battles also at the end of the day. So a great suggestion for something like that would be to bring those concerns to annual meetings, or sending notes to the board at their board meetings that maybe they need to send out an e-blast, or, make the community a little bit more aware of the things that, the whole community can pitch in and help with. One thing that I always strive to tell a lot of people is, do not confront someone in the heat of the moment. And I think that is, if you don't take anything else away from this webinar, don't confront someone in the heat of the moment, because it never ends well. And you end up saying something or coming across in a certain way that maybe you didn't mean to, but it's in the heat of the moment. So, it's always a better idea to write it down. If you have your property manager, notify your property manager. The association at the end of the day should do their best to investigate and consult with the property manager. and legal counsel if it gets to that point, if necessary. But at the end of the day, sometimes there might be certain, disputes that do escalate, and it appears that a homeowner could be in danger, or maybe they're being harassed. And it could go against the Housing and Urban Development or the Fair Housing Act. In that case, associations do need to be involved, and they need to report, and they need to take it seriously because they don't want a lawsuit at that point. The association would need to be involved and take action if there was any type of harassment related to the Fair Housing Act, which could include anything due to race, color, religion, sex, familial status, national origin, or disability, or if the harassment is severe, if it's persistent, if it's consistently disruptive and affecting a resident's daily quality of life, the association should step in. Because this can sometimes be a gray area, there should also be documentation, there should be evidence, and fact-based information to back up these claims, since that can be a gray area. Typically, the community documents will describe the actions that the associations can take to address behaviors. But let's talk about different ways to resolve disputes if they do escalate into something that needs a little bit more attention, if they can't be resolved amongst the homeowners. So of course, we don't want it to get to this point, but the legal team, if the association, their legal team is going to be a great plethora of information and a way forward if disputes escalate. Legal counsel can help with investigating incidents. They can send cease and desist notice. They can hold a hearing before the board. They can charge fines, filing lawsuits against a homeowner if need be. So, obviously we don't want to get to the point where you have to get legal involved, but sometimes it does come to that. Another approach is, mediation. So you can do a three-way mediation by addressing the conflict between two owners and then somebody representing the association. The association's legal counsel can be the facilitator, and they can, work to resolve the issue and avoid a potential lawsuit. And then if an informal mediation is unsuccessful, a formal mediation can be done. However, it's going to be more expensive. So anything that you can do to really, try to work through everything in a reasonable manner is going to be less expensive for all three parties involved. But at the end of the day, the association's attorney will be able to ensure that proper protocol is being followed. So another thing that people can do is, depending on the circumstances, they can write a letter to another homeowner, to the offending resident. So they can either send a letter or cease and desist notice to the owner, whoever, that it needs to be sent to. Mailing the letter with a return receipt to confirm that the owner received it will also help. Informing the owner that the behavior has violated the law or the association's governing documents, and just, really ensuring in the letter that you're being specific about the occurrences, describing the behaviors in detail, and then warning, that if this fails, if this behavior continues, and the harassment or behavior continues, they will be subject to consequences such as fines or, legal action. So that brings us to the next point, which is violations and fines. And your documents and your CC&Rs, you can define the consequences, or they will be defined for violating different policies. So finding, offenders, are effective usually in enforcing most policies. We also suggest that you can revoke certain privileges, such as recreational facilities, pool access, parking in garages, really just depending on what your community is like and if you have any amenities and access to those amenities. So things like that. But, I don't know if anybody else saw on the news lately, but I just saw this, story that was repeating, and it caught my eye because I saw a lady, and she asked her neighbor, she went over to her neighbor's house and she asked her neighbor to turn his music down, and he shot her. And so the point that I would like to make is to really, like I said, pick and choose your battles, because is choosing to confront your neighbor really worth it over turning music down or, something like that? Is it worth it? And, how is it going to affect your life, your family, your well-being by choosing to do that? Because, how important is it to go over and confront a neighbor about doing something like that? Because you don't know how it will turn out. And we never know what our neighbors are going through. We don't know what they're capable of, and at the end of the day, it's so much easier to be friendly and kind than angry and confrontational. Sometimes it might be easier and better to write a note, as a reminder, a kind note, mind you, with a reminder, hey, I know you enjoy listening to your music, but I do have a baby at home that's, that goes to sleep at 7:30. So maybe do you think that you could try to not have the music, as loud during those hours? So that's just going to be so much easier than going after a long day for somebody maybe at work, or a mom who's been at home with her kids all day, to maybe diffuse even a potential confrontation. So the association doesn't really need to be involved in those daily petty arguments, but they do need to enforce the community documents. They need to focus on keeping home values, where they need to be by improving and maintaining the community. This is the reason really why community association management companies have become so popular over the last decade. The property manager and the supporting company can be that third party, and be there to enforce the rules and regulations, while the board members don't have to act as the bad guy anymore. So I can't tell you how many board members that I've spoken to, and they're like, man, I don't feel safe because I want to enforce, trash cans not being out on non-trash days. But, then I feel like I'm being targeted because people don't like me, because I'm only enforcing, but I'm at the end of the day, I'm enforcing these documents because I want to keep our community nice, and I want to keep, the home values where they need to be. And I'm doing this for the community, but then, people don't want those enforced. And everybody gets it, everybody understands it, but nobody wants to be, targeted, and nobody wants to receive a violation. So, at the end of the day, like I said, that's why community association management companies have become so popular in the last decade, because they can take the weight off of the board as far as, covenant enforcement goes and violations. And, we'll have a lot of people that will ask us, well, our community, we have about 5 people, and they are, I don't know if you're going to be able to handle them. But at the end of the day, that's what we do for a living. So, we have everything where we can have everything documented. We can we can provide that guidance to the board as far as what to do and how to go about, different disputes and conflicts. And we can be the ones to really focus in on those homeowners that, are recurring offenders. So a property manager, like I said, they will have the skills and the training to help navigate situations like resolving the conflict and dealing with those legal matters, and providing the guidance to the board so that they can stay focused on the budget items that they would like to accomplish for that year or the following year. So that's what we would want them to stay focused on, are those agenda items. So the association and its membership should always do their best to promote positive neighborly relationships for the sake of the community. getting to know one another, making an effort to be kind. Like I said, I feel like I continue to say be kind, because that's just, it's so positive, and you get a lot further in life by being kind than by being confrontational and angry. It's never a good idea to confront someone in the heat of the moment. I think I said that again too. So I want to repeat some of those key items, because this is how you resolve a dispute. I mean, it really is. And, escalations. So, like I said, again, sometimes a kind note to your neighbor regarding your concern can be much better interpreted and appreciated. So the goal is to initially resolve the conflict in a quick and effective and nice manner. Most people are naturally receptive to that type of communication, and it goes a long way. So I'm going to open it up a little bit. Does anybody have any questions? Does anybody have any input at all? But if nobody has anything to add or to say, really in conclusion, the key takeaways, and just to kind of recap, we wanted to talk about, the importance of being proactive in a dispute if it's escalating. We wanted to really understand what a dispute was, the impact that it has on associations, and then really distinguishing when disputes need the attention of the association and intervention, and those that don't. And then also ways to resolve disputes. So, those are the key takeaway, and like I said, being kind. You can't ever be too kind, and it's always a lot easier, to be kind and be confrontational. But also at the end of the day, I think it's also very important for associations to really focus on the positive relationships, really getting to know one another, scheduling events and getting to know one another, cookouts, and really getting to know your neighbor. Let's see here. We have a question. All right. Glover?
Speaking. Hi.
How are you?
I am well this evening.
Good. Glad to have you.
Thank you. Thank you. You know what? I had a situation here. I'm fairly new. I've only been here about 2 years since I retired.
Okay.
But coming into my residence, I've had to do a little investigating because I found out I share a common wall with a resident.
Okay.
And I don't know, I came in, you come in, you meet your neighbors. But anyway, I had on one of my adjoining walls, there was I come to find out the person that owned the building, they more or less, I guess they rented their apartment out.
Yeah.
And I had some younger residents. And it just so happened on the other side of the residence was one of the board members. And I would tell you within a 2-year period, because of late night noise and parties, and I mean, I've called the police at least, I'd say between 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. at least 8 times.
Yeah.
And it really, got to be a nuisance more than it should have been, because, here our bylaws are 10 p.m. is the shutdown time.
Yeah, because you have the noise.
And, and I would see, the resident, throughout the daytime, and I tried to speak and say, so originally they said, well, hey, I'm in the music, I'm a producer and this. So if it gets loud, here's my, number, give me a call and I'll shut it down. And that was working for a while, but after, 10 times of that, eventually, that was starting, I call and it just become a moot point. So then I said, well, okay, well, I just started calling the police. And then with that, I do my documentation. So I'd ask the officers, as they come out, just make sure they, document and give me a copy. And, it got to the point where even the person who was on the board here, they was like, wow, it really got out of hand.
Yeah.
So, so even they started calling and we would talk, between me and the, person on the other side. Hey, did you hear that last night? Hey, that was 3, this 4, sometimes it's 5 a.m.
Right.
And yeah. So
But you did a great
I,
job.
I
You did a great job.
well, yeah, we worked as a team in tandem. And eventually, after so many times and after so long, I'd imagine the last 6 months, I really see a difference. It really has subsided, and thank God for that. You know, but like you were saying, I just happen to be a retired person where I didn't have to get up early in the morning. But God forbid, if I were here, a family or someone with a child or children,
Right.
you know.
And that's like,
So
that's what we
I
talked
just wanted to share,
well,
let you.
for that, because I think that that's kind of part of what I shared earlier is like, once you're interfering with somebody's quality of life, their daily quality of life, by repeatedly and consistently, playing loud music, at all hours of the nights, and you've tried to call the police, and you've tried to, put the board on notice, and you've tried all of the, and they've tried, then, at some point in time, if that's just, continue to be recurring, then that's when, the legal counsel can be contacted and they can send, a notice to that owner saying, hey, this has been done. This has been done. The law enforcement has been out X amount of times. And, if this continues, X, Y, and Z will be happening. So
Sure.
you did great by being persistent and, documenting.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
You did a great job by how you handled it.
Well, like I said, I had the board members on the other side, so we kind of, I guess, tag team and doubled it up.
Yeah. Well, and it was great that you tried to, diffuse that escalation. You tried to do the things.
Well, initially, I'd see them and, kind of, hey, it's late, this, but, like I said, they're younger and I mean, I was young at one time too, and I understand, but
it's also a quality of life thing. You don't want to be up all night every night either with loud music and parties. So,
for sure.
you also deserve to have, that quiet, enjoyment and that quality of life. So you deserve that as well.
Okay.
So thank you for sharing. I enjoyed that story. Does anybody else have any questions? Well, thank you for joining me this evening. Hopefully that, gave you a couple of different tips, just about how to handle things. And of course, the story at the end was great. And thank you for that. And thank you guys for joining me this evening. And this will be available on our website, the webinar. So if you want to go back and review it, or if you have any friends or neighbors or family members that would like to view the webinar as well, let them know to go to www.myardent.com. It's also available on all of our social media, on Instagram, Facebook. So please, LinkedIn, go follow us, and you can look at any of our other webinars that we have posted as well. So thank you and have a wonderful evening.
Good night.
Good night.